Okay, there we go. All right, so just going to kind of look over some of the training objectives for today. So as a prevention professional, sometimes we're regularly faced with situations that will involve ethics. And oftentimes it is going to be clear about how we should act ethically. But in some situations, we might not be aware of our ethical responsibility, or we might not know how to respond ethically. And, you know, we do have the laws and we do have policies that are a good starting point, but we may face some challenging situations in prevention that are not really clearly prescribed in the regulations that we do have laid out for us. And so this training will help us to make ethical choices in our everyday work that we do. It's going to give us a decision-making process to kind of guide us through what is the right thing to do in different situations. So as a result of this training, we're hoping that you are going to be able to define ethics and the related terms surrounding ethics, describe the 6 principles in the Prevention Code of Ethics, and those 6 principles we're going to go over in great detail, but just kind of give you a snapshot of what those are. It's non-discrimination, competence, integrity, nature of services, confidentiality, and then ethical obligation for community and society. And then we will provide you with that ethical decision-making process that will help us to apply the Prevention Code of Ethics that we are going to be giving to you. And so, you know, while we're not going to be able to cover every situation related to ethics and prevention, we are going to explore many different scenarios together during this training. And moving forward, you should find that you'll be able to apply the principles and the decision-making process that we present here to pretty much cover any ethical dilemmas that you might face as prevention professionals. So one thing that I like to ask is, when you think about ethics and prevention, you know, what are you hoping to get out of this? And I'll just have you either unmute yourself and talk, or you can chat it in the chat box, whichever. So what are you hoping to get out of the ethics portions of this class?
Just an understanding of what the ethics related specifically to prevention, because for most of us, the things that we do have a code of ethics, and making sure you understand how they meet, how they cross, and where they may be very different. Mm-hmm. So that's.
Thank you, Megan. Charlie took the easy way out and said what Megan said. Any other thoughts?
I think we started to talk at the same time.
Yeah, I recently had an ethics dilemma, but with a different profession, and I looked up their code of ethics, and I was shocked to find out that it was 9 items, whereas mine is like 30 pages. So yeah, so I don't even know what the code of ethics for prevention is.
Yep. Thank you. I know that even, I can't remember the first time that I went through this training, but there were just some things I'm like, gosh, I've never thought about that. Or, so I think that some things will be obvious to us, like, well, duh, but the other is like, oh, gosh, I've never really thought about that would be an ethical dilemma kind of a thing. So how many of you, besides Charlie, have experienced an ethical dilemma in the work that you've done? And you don't have to tell us what it is, but either raise your hand or chat in the chat box. Yes. Yes, you've experienced a ethical dilemma. Okay.
I've definitely experienced them with, like, I mean, I live in Rapid, which is big compared to where some of the rest of us live, but still, like, having sort of close ties with clients or clients' families. I one time had one of my really close friends' sisters needed treatment, and she was referred to my program, and so I had to kind of go in a roundabout way of trying to figure out how to refer her out, and not be her counselor because it was just kind of too close for home.
Right.
But so that's been tricky sometimes where a name will come across my desk and I'm like, oh, I can't do this.
Yep, exactly. So you might be thinking too, like if you've been faced with a ethical dilemma, it might have been something like, I'm just not comfortable with this. I don't feel like I'm, qualified to be able to do this. If you're asked to do something, or you might be thinking, this just doesn't seem right to me. I'm feeling uneasy about this. Things like that. And there have been times, I think, when people have had to leave their positions just because maybe that ethical dilemma got too big for them and they just didn't know what to do. So it was just kind of easier just to walk away from that position. Have any of you experienced that ever, where you've had to walk away from a position? I see some head nods and some no's, so that's good. So, if you didn't raise your hand, that you've never really thought that you faced an ethical dilemma, maybe during this training, something might spur a memory of, yeah, maybe that was an ethical dilemma and I just really wasn't aware of it at the time. And so sometimes in prevention, we will find ourselves making those choices or ethical decisions without even realizing it. And so this training is really all about understanding and really intentionally applying ethics in the prevention work that we do. So part of this training is the group guidelines, and I'm just going to throw these up here. They're a little, we set these at the beginning of SAPS, but they do have a few different things noted on here. Take turns speaking, which we do that well. Participate fully, be open and respectful. ELMO, does anybody know what ELMO stands for? Besides that cute little red thing on Sesame Street? So yeah, ELMO stands for enough, let's move on. So if we are, really over processing a specific topic, we might just have to say, okay, we need to call an ELMO and we need to move on for the sake of time and for the sake of the fact that we know that we're not going to solve this problem right here, right now. We ask that you save the email, etc., things like that for breaks. Be punctual after breaks. Since we have it broken into 2-hour segments, it might not be such a big deal here. And then respect confidentiality. So, in other words, when we're talking about ideas, we want to make sure that, we're not sharing people's names or using identifying information. We also might want to use that, Las Vegas rule with what's said here stays here, what's done in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas, that kind of a thing. But we really want to make sure that we respect that confidentiality. And of course that, the rule of confidentiality obviously goes out the window if there's, if someone indicates that harm of to themselves or someone else, and if there's about the information about someone shares about abuse and neglect. So, in these cases, with that piece even, that's an ethical and often legal obligation that we do need to take action. And we will talk about confidentiality later on in this training. So are there any others that you guys want to add to this? All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you. What's funny is I was thinking the last time we did this training, I think I don't think anybody was able to talk through the class.
I think you're right. I think we had to have only chat only.
So we've come a long way in a year.
Right. We'll be able to put them into breakout rooms. It's going to be awesome.
It's wonderful. Okay, can you go to the next slide?
I sure can. Maybe. There we go.
So ethics is a word we use often, but people may define it differently. So what do you think of when you think of the word ethics? What comes to mind when you think of ethics and prevention? Again, you can chat or just unmute yourself. Absolutely nothing. That's why you're here today, right? right versus wrong, Emily said. Yep. Anything else?
I feel like I would just really want to know the facts that I'm presenting, so I'm not misleading kids, because they will pick up on that and throw it at you like a box of eggs.
Absolutely, you're so right, Charlie. Yes. Yeah, if you throw it out there, you better know what you're talking about, or just don't touch it, right? Because yeah, they definitely. I even think of like, I'm always very conscious when I'm talking to students about, let's say meth makes you ugly campaign we used to have a few years ago, and you show pictures of people on meth with all the sores and all that. And it's really important to say to kids, this is what can happen to you. But of course, there's a lot of kids that know people that use meth that they don't look like that at all. And so if you're like, this is what meth does to you, all of a sudden they're like, I don't believe you, because I know people that do meth and they don't look like that and they don't act like this. And so, yeah, completely agree with you, Charlie, on that. Anything else? Excuse me. All right, Dodi, you can go to the next one. So ethics is defined through values, principles, and ethics. And you can click that first one, Dodi. Values is deeply held ideas, convictions, and principles influenced by culture, region, etc. So some examples of values would be the value of being a hard worker, or the value of family values, putting family first, or loyalty to your job. The next one would be principles, and that's reflect the moral values of an individual or group about right and wrong conduct. As Emily said, that right versus wrong. So some examples of this would be do no harm, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, do the greatest good for those in the greatest need. And then ethics. Agreed upon codes of behavior based on distinct sets of principles. And so we're going to take a look over the next 6 hours, that prevention code of ethics. As you said, a lot of you maybe haven't seen that prevention code of ethics. You, from different fields that you work in, whether you're a licensed counselor or addiction counselor, you have a code of ethics. So does the world of prevention. And so we will talk about that a little bit more. Go ahead, Dodi. As Dodi mentioned, this is the 6 principles that we'll be going over over the next 3 days that we meet. She talked about having that think tank pulled out. And if you would just kind of pull that out for a second, and I will show you. So that think tank has those 6 principles on there, and each time we talk about one of them, so when we talk about non-discrimination, you can see that there's some information on that. So we'll pull this think tank out. We'll have somebody read that out loud. We'll kind of have you maybe highlight or underline some takeaways that you had from what we read, and process that before we go through that principle. So really important to have that pulled out and readily available. This was adopted by the IC and RC, the International Certification and Reciprocity Consortium, in 2011. So what does that mean? Like our board, the Board of Addiction and Prevention Professionals, BAP, that is through the IC and RC. And so we're certified through that, whether you're an addictions counselor or a prevention specialist, or both. Some people are both. Go ahead, Dodi. So when we're talking about ethics, values are really tied with that. And so we have some examples here listed. If you could pull that up, Dodi. Yep, some examples, and then you can put the next one down there. And I want you to look at all of these examples up here as far as values, and which ones do you personally value the most? Which ones are most important to you? And then which ones are maybe least important to you? So just take a minute to look through those and kind of quickly kind of categorize those, maybe 1 or 2 that would be at your top, and maybe 1 or 2 that would be at the lowest for you. So what are some of the values you place at most important for you? When you looked at those, what are 1 or 2 of them that you put as most important?
Accountability, honesty, and family first.
Accountability, honesty, and family first. Thank you. Emily had reliability. Reliability and accountability, Rebecca said. Thank you. Oh, and Emily also said right versus wrong. Thank you. Oh, no, reliability. Sorry, that was what you said before. Sorry. How about least important then? Was that a little bit tougher to say which ones were least important? Yeah. Rebecca, are you saying that your least important was family first? Yes. And Emily said family first as well was one of their least. Thank you. So what were some of the different factors that influence how we prioritize our own personal values? What influences that you would say, you know, reliability and accountability would be on your high end, but, you know, family first would be at the low end? What are some things that come into play there of how we make those determinations?
I think for me, when I hear, like, when I look at this list, I kind of see that, like, you can't really have loyalty and honesty or equity without reliability. Like, if you're not going to be showing up and people can't rely on you to show up for things, or to tell the truth, or, you know, whatever that is, then I think it kind of ties in for everything, honesty and loyalty. And I think for family first, it's hard because our family are also just people. So sometimes they don't share the same values as us, or you might have deeper connections or better connections with people outside of your family. I do have good connections with my family, but I think most of these things would come before just having family first, regardless of what kind of situation we were in. Like, I would need these other values in order to feel like I could put my family first.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. And that makes a lot of sense. Kind of they're almost intertwined a little bit. Like you said, if you can't have some of these other things unless you have reliability. So that for you, that one really kind of encompassed a lot of them. Rebecca said those things come first and the rest follows, basically what Emily said. Thank you. So yeah, and I think some other things that can impact just how we were raised impacts our values, obviously. Maybe our cultural background, even the region that we live in can impact values and what we value most, or just our own personal life experiences, what we've gone through. So I think this can change, you know, from what I think I know when I got into this field at 26 and now 16 years later, I've grown a lot, and how I view things have greatly changed over those years, just by life experiences and maturity, right?
Michelle?
Yeah.
I think too, when teaching about poverty and economics, like just different economic classes and different rules and they have such a different definition of each of these and how they kind of triangleize together.
Yep. Thanks, Dominique. Yeah, so many of us probably see a lot of these as important, and it might even kind of feel uncomfortable to try to prioritize them because we feel like, well, all of them are important to me, but it is important for us to be able to prioritize them, both for our personal and our professional life. Go ahead, Dodie. So values can be complementary. Values can compete or conflict. Can you think of an example? Can you describe a situation where values might compete or conflict?
I think definitely anytime family is involved.
Yeah.
So yeah, like for example, if you have if your child or grandchild is sick and you want to stay home and take care of them, but yet I've had this training scheduled for 6 months. If I have to reschedule it, that's 30 other people that I'm putting out. That becomes a challenge, I think.
A real challenge, which
Yeah.
we've we've definitely dealt with many times over the years.
Like
Because you kind of have that parent guilt, right? Like you want to be there for your kids. Of course, when they're sick, you want to be able to be there for them. And they're, I mean, I do conflict. I have a hard time with that family first and work, because I do want to put my kids first always. But yet I have a lot of passion for my work. So finding that balance. Charlie, what were you going to say?
Oh, just going back to the previous slide, and like Dominique said, how different groups of people define things too. Like I have a client who is, you know, embedded with loyalty and family first, and it's kind of on his shoulders to raise money for the family, you know, at a very young age. So he's selling drugs.
Right.
You know, like, yeah, that's all.
Yep. Yeah. Great example.
I think sometimes too, like honesty and I can't remember exactly everything that was on there, but like respect, like most people think like respect is a strong value, and sometimes honesty needs to kind of take the back seat in order to be respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And like just kind of like weighing those boundaries of like also loyalty and honesty. Sometimes like if I'm honest about the situation, maybe I'm being disloyal to the person who told me their secret,
Right.
or you know, vice versa. So I think sometimes that can be kind of convoluted. I know we obviously have that in our field with like, this might not necessarily be like a duty to report, but it should be something that maybe I should tell someone or communicate. Am I kind of crossing that boundary of, you know, my loyalty and confidentiality with my clients because I feel like it's for the betterment of them? I mean, there's sometimes it just gets a little wonky.
It does. It's muddy. You know, you wish it was just kind of black and white. And but yeah, sometimes there's that gray area of what I should do in this situation. Absolutely.
And
Great
accountability that was on there too. I think sometimes that can be hard when you want to hold somebody else accountable. I know I've had that issue with clients of like, I want to hold you accountable and I need you to tell the truth. But I also can't just like call you out right now. So how do I kind of ride that line of trying to get you to be accountable, but also keeping my loyalty to you as my client?
Absolutely. Oh, great examples. Thank you so much, Emily. Yeah, so ethical dilemmas most commonly occur when we have conflicting values. So those examples that we shared were great there. These conflicts could be internal with an individual or among colleagues within your agency or your organization. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, we talked about some personal ones, but it might even be between colleagues. Go ahead, Dodie. So here's a little activity. Which value? Amy has the opportunity to apply for a new position that will advance her career. However, when she learns that her friend Tina is going for the same position, she decides not to pursue it for fear of jeopardizing their friendship. So which value do you think that Amy was, and I think we have a poll, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Loyalty.
Let me launch it here. There you go.
So you can go ahead and answer this. Of the values you see here, which do you think had the greatest influence on Amy's decision? And then which two values do you think are in conflict for Amy? So go ahead and answer those two, and then we'll talk about it.
So it tells us, like, it asks which two values, but
Yeah.
It only lets you pick one, right?
yeah.
Sorry, I set it up wrong.
Okay, just do the first one and we'll talk about the second one.
Okay, I think everybody's had a chance. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, so we'll do this. I'll share results. Can you see them?
100% said loyalty. It does look like some were able to, no,
No.
you were only just probably picking one there. I got it. So yeah, loyalty to her friend was probably what influenced her decision the most, right? She was worried about jeopardizing that friendship. So which two values do you think were in conflict for Amy?
Loyalty and achievement.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I want to go do, I want to advance in my career, so achievement is important to me, but I also am loyal to my friendship and I don't want to jeopardize that, right? So she was kind of conflicted between those two values. Would it have been okay for Amy to make a different decision?
I want to make a comment real quick on how the two people put family first.
Yeah.
Because in different family rules and backgrounds, our friends are family.
Mm-hmm.
So they think of them as family. So it's a family conflict. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks, Dominique. Great point. So do you think it would have been okay for Amy to make a different choice? I mean, could she have looked at going for that advancement, even though her friend was too?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was really no right or wrong way to resolve this ethical dilemma. Amy had a decision. She had to base that on her own personal values, right, and make that decision. But it wouldn't have been wrong for someone else to go ahead and go for that because they valued that achievement. So knowing what to do and how to respond when your personal and or your professional values conflict isn't always easy or clear. Personal or professional codes of ethics can help us make these difficult decisions. So hopefully we'll, as we go through these ethical codes of ethics will help us a little bit. I do also want to mention, Charlie said, I try to create a safe space for my clients to tell their parents themselves. And yeah, I think that's great. We talk a lot about like, well, we do need to talk to mom and dad about this. Would you rather talk to mom or dad? Do you want to make that call while I'm here? Or do you want me to make that call? But creating that safe space so they feel comfortable talking to the parents themselves is great. Anything else you wanted to say to that, Charlie?
No, it's just as you were speaking, I thought it was interesting because I haven't come into this with having any clients who have a mom or a dad to choose from.
Sure. Isn't that something?
Yeah. So, sorry, that was just interesting, but
yeah.
Something I picked up when you were speaking. But yeah, just kind of, sometimes I ask them like, do you want me to tell them or do you want to tell them? Yeah, just making it as comfortable for them as possible. And also sometimes it depends on, if I know that it's going to create harm for my client, or there's the possibility that it could create harm for my client, then, their safety is more important to me than their parents knowing everything that's going on.
Right, and that in itself is kind of an ethical decision. yeah, I know.
Tricky, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. All right, next slide. So, understanding unethical behaviors. So there's two things we need to look at. There's commission.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. You can put both of them up there.
Okay.
There's commission and then omission.
It doesn't.
Oh, okay. So go to commission. Commission is when you say or do something that is unethical. So we actually say or do something that's unethical. Where omission would be that we're failing to take action when we see something unethical happening. So commission, we're seeing something or saying something, or saying or doing something unethical. Where omission, we might see something that's unethical, but we just fail to do anything about it. So we're going to look at a couple situations here, some examples.
So Michelle, I think we have this set up as a poll as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have the whole statement in the poll though, or do we have to read them first?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So there's two situations here, and then go ahead and put if you think this is commission or omission.
All right. I think we got pretty much everyone. Oh, no, we do.
So the first one, the prevention training manual you created includes images and pictures that you found on the internet, but you didn't obtain permission to use them. 78% said commission, 22% said omission. So that first one would be commission because you engaged in an unethical behavior by including images in your training manual without permission that were not your own or your organization's. We'll talk about this one later, but I know I've been guilty of this. I think it's a pretty common one. Like we think if we find those things on the internet that we can just go ahead and pop those into our PowerPoint slides. So sometimes I think we do things we're not trying to be unethical. We just don't realize what we're doing is unethical, right? But so that one's an example of commission because we did something that was unethical. The second one is when reviewing your colleague's slide presentation, you notice that he did not credit the source of his data, but you didn't say anything to him about this. So that one would be omission because you saw something unethical happening, but you didn't address it. Does that make sense? Any questions about that, between the difference? Okay. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, getting there.
Yep.
Do you want me to put them all up there, Michelle?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is just to kind of summarize why a code of ethics. Why as prevention professionals do we need a code of ethics? That first one says respond appropriate to ethical dilemmas. Personal and professional values can compete or conflict, and it's not always clear what to do when we're faced with an ethical dilemma. And so that code of ethics can kind of help us guide us through that situation. Unethical behavior can include both actions taken as well as not taken. So we have to make sure that it's unethical to do something that we know is unethical, but also if we see something happening, like a colleague doing something unethical and we don't address it, that is a conflicting, we're doing something unethical in that situation as well. A code of ethics based on values and principles of a professional group can help individuals recognize and avoid unethical behavior in the work. So it can help us, like it says, make sound and respectful choices each day, create a climate of respect, and protect those involved and served by prevention activities. I think for me, that's the most important one. We're going to protect those involved and served by prevention activities, just like we do if we are a licensed counselor or addiction counselor. And we'll talk about this a little bit more. So when we're doing universal prevention, we don't have to worry so much about protecting like confidentiality because that program's offered to everybody. But obviously when you start getting into indicated or selective prevention, so you're doing an individual or a specific group, or you're doing diversion, that's where we really need to look at protecting that confidentiality of the people that we're working with. Do you have anything to add about how an agreed upon code of ethics can help us in our work as prevention professionals? So you saw the things listed here. Is there anything else that you would add that you think, why you think having a code of ethics as a prevention specialist would be important?
It's kind of like a contract. And so when you do have a dilemma, you have something to fall back on. you have a resource. And I don't know if it's true in prevention, but in my field, like supervision and consultation is a huge part of our code of ethics. So it's nice to know that like you're never alone in having to make a big decision that affects other people's lives.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. I think it's super important. I actually think this is pretty interesting stuff. I'm kind of weird like that, but as Dodie said, we went through this training just a few years ago, and Dodie's been in the field over 20 years, and I 15 plus, 16 plus, and I learned a lot and felt like, wow, I wish I would have had a better grasp. I should have had a better grasp on this day one, you know, when I started, and so it was very helpful for me to go through this. The other thing I want to say is in 6 hours, we are just going to scratch the surface of the code of ethics. And so just like your SAPS binder was laid out, I want, you know, there are really useful handouts. So you have your tab for each PowerPoint we're going to go through, but then behind that, you should have those handouts. And so a lot of those handouts have additional information of the things that we're covering. And there's definitely more training out there if you find this topic interesting and want to learn more about it. And with that, if there's no questions, Dodie is going to start talking about our first principle of non-discrimination.
Okay, just give me 1 second. So for the next one, I promise I'll have them all combined. I didn't even think to do that today. So here we go. Can you see what are you seeing?
Just your PowerPoint.
That's okay. There we go. All right. Flip my tab here. All right, so Michelle kind of took us through just a brief introduction of ethics, and now we're going to start looking at that prevention code of ethics. So today we're hoping to get through non-discrimination and competence. Friday we're hoping to get through integrity, nature of services, and confidentiality, and then next Tuesday we will get through the ethical obligations for community and society. All right, so let's begin let's begin the non-discrimination portion of this training by looking at this particular scenario. So here we have pictured a staff from an urban prevention agency, and they are meeting to discuss the upcoming award ceremony for its peer leadership program. It's important to know that this program serves a mix of both low-income inner city youth and middle-class suburban youth. So we have Leslie, the program leader, Kyle, the program director, and Marty, the agency director. Could I have 3 volunteers, one of you to say the role of Leslie, one to be Kyle, and one to be Marty? And all you have to do is just read the bubbles that they're saying on the screen.
Sure, I'll be Marty.
Okay. Who would want to be Kyle?
I'll be Kyle.
Okay, and then Leslie.
I can be Leslie.
All right, so Marty, you can start.
I have some great news. A good friend of mine just opened a beautiful banquet hall about 15 miles outside of the city. He's offered to donate the facility for our award ceremony.
Okay, so let's keep in mind that this guy is the agency director. Picture your agency director in your mind, okay? Leslie says,
Wow, a banquet facility? That would be so much nicer than holding a ceremony in our own gym again. But won't that increase our food costs? We were just planning to serve pizza.
okay, and then how about Kyle? Or no, Marty.
Not a problem. My friend is donating a full meal for all the kids and their parents.
Okay, so that's sounding pretty good, isn't it? But what's Kyle have to say?
That sounds pretty great, Marty, but many of the families living downtown will have a hard time getting all the way out there. Plus, we've already talked to everyone, and they're expecting the event to be in the gym as usual. Some of the neighborhood kids have even started making decorations.
Okay. Leslie says,
I don't see how we can pass this up. I've heard that this new banquet hall is beautiful. The local kids and families won't mind at all. In fact, I bet they'll love it.
And then, okay.
And our board of directors is thrilled with the idea. I need to give my friend an answer today or we might lose this opportunity. So what do you think, Kyle?
All right, so what I would like you to do right now is take a couple minutes and I want you to write down how you think Kyle should respond. And then once you have something written down, you can just write done in the chat box, or if you want to write your answer, you can, but we will kind of come back and revisit this a little bit later on. So how do you think Kyle should respond?
What is that noise? Do you hear that?
Oh, it's my computer. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was still on mute.
Here, I thought it was a puppy barking.
Yeah.
No, my computer, for whatever reason, does that thing sometimes.
It sounds like a video game or something.
All right, so we have.
Oh man, you caught me.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you playing Frogger? Oh wait, that probably doesn't even exist anymore. I think we have a lot are done. I'll give you just another 30 seconds or so. And does anyone want to share what they think as to how he should respond?
I said that he should be true to himself and what and the issues that he sees relevant, and that they should maybe try and come up with a compromise before making a commitment, such as finding transportation or making sure that the kids can still use their decorations.
I said the exact same thing.
Oh my gosh, you guys are on the same wavelength.
I also said the same thing. I mean, essentially just that, yeah, like I would have him respond by asking if, since the food's being donated, if they could utilize that money for transportation, since that was obviously a concern of his.
Right.
I said the same thing.
Okay.
I said that it would be a great option for next year.
Ooh, okay. All right.
I thought that we should take a poll or have people, other decision makers, a part of that decision.
Okay.
I think it's also good to remind him of who their target audience is and not just doing it because it's fancy and new and fun, but doing it because it's appropriate for the group they're trying to serve.
Yep. All right. So thank you for sharing that. We are going to revisit this story, like I said, and we'll talk about what Kyle should do toward the end of when we're talking about the non-discrimination principle. So let's take a minute here and look at what this principle is all about. So if I could have you pull out that Prevention Code of Ethics think tank that we talked about right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the non-discrimination principle out loud. And while I do that, what I'd like you to do is kind of underline some key words or jot down some of those key points that you think are important for this one. So it says, prevention professionals shall not discriminate against service recipients or colleagues based on race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, sex, age, sexual orientation, education level, economic or medical condition, or physical or mental ability. Prevention professionals should broaden their understanding and acceptance of cultural and individual differences, and in doing so, render services and provide information sensitive to those services. So what were some of those key points that you pulled out of that? Or key concepts?
Well, economics, sometimes, you know, the comfort level of people that is very different in different socioeconomic backgrounds. So the idea of, that's why it's important to ask their opinion and their comfort level, because changing that, middle class systems are very sometimes different, and the wealthy versus people that are in a, either coming out of generational poverty or the working class poor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dominique. And you know, really the situation that we just heard about with Kyle, you know, it really does reflect on that economics piece in regards to, you know, so we do have this beautiful facility. The food is going to be donated, and maybe we can find transportation for them, but are they going to be comfortable doing that? You know, we do need to kind of engage that conversation to find out, you know, if they're comfortable with that. If not, are we discriminating against them, right?
Exactly, or putting pressure. It's like kind of like peer pressuring them into having it all about us versus about them,
right.
You know?
Yep. All right, anyone else have a thought on what a key point was that you wrote down or underlined?
For me, it was physical or mental ability.
Okay.
I have a sister that is challenged by both, and she's involved with Black Hills Works out here, and I am constantly amazed at how they challenge her and how she rises to the occasion.
Mm-hmm.
And just me as her sister, I'm always underestimating her. So I think we maybe sometimes underestimate people.
Okay.
I mean, I think we all do.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think the key thing that stood out to me is, and kind of encapsulates it all, is that prevention professionals should broaden their understanding and acceptance of cultural and individual differences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so the non-discrimination principle is really meant to help us deliver substance abuse prevention services that are accessible, equitable, and appropriate for diverse populations. Because we know that substance abuse can affect anyone. And so to ensure that people can access and benefit from prevention services, as prevention professionals, we really need to strive to create those environments that are free from bias and free from discrimination. There's an example that I came up with, and I was reading this book called Searching for Sunday last year when we were doing this particular training. It's by Rachel Held Evans. And she talks about how she was, you know, kind of just struggling with her faith, or finding her way through her faith, basically. And she was talking about how she was attending a church that happened to be down south somewhere, very conservative, that kind of thing. And there was a statewide vote coming up on whether they should legalize LGBTQ marriages, right? And so she happened to come to church one day, and in the lawn was one of those signs that said, vote this way so that this does not pass. The church obviously did not want this to be legalized, that gay marriages would be approved, right? And she said she went into the church and she just sat there thinking about the fact that, you know, that's pretty much discrimination, in the fact that if you have somebody who's sitting, let's say, in the choir loft, and they are LGBTQ, but nobody really knows that, you know, are they going to be listening to what's going on in the service at that point? Or what are they going to be? They're not. They're going to be disengaged because they're not going to feel comfortable even being there. Just like even she was, she's not a part of that population, but she really believes in being open to everyone and, equal rights, equal opportunities, things like that. And she said, even when I walked into the church, not having anything in the game, she's like, I could not focus on what was being said because I was focused on the fact that this is what this church is standing for, and I don't know that that goes with my beliefs, kind of a thing. So I think that we just, it probably wasn't even an intentional thing that the church was trying to out those. I don't know, maybe it was, but yet it didn't make those people comfortable. And so I just thought that was a really good example. So at the same time, this principle really calls for more than the absence of discrimination. It calls for cultural competence, general cultural awareness, sensitivity, and appreciation throughout the whole entire prevention process, which is what we learned about in our first section of FAPS, right? So these really are the key concepts on this slide of non-discrimination, which we're going to cover in this section. So the first one is avoiding and preventing discrimination. Next one is complying with anti-discrimination laws and regulations. And then the last piece of it is promoting the cultural competence. So we need to understand what discrimination is. And discrimination refers to that unfair, unequal treatment of an individual or group based on certain characteristics. Okay. So what do you think are some examples of individual and group characteristics that people are discriminated against?
I know people try to comply with ADA. It doesn't really work. Like maybe the doors on the outside are automatic and they can get in, but then to get into the bathroom door inside the facility is not automatic, or there's no push button.
Mm-hmm. Good example, thank you. Any others?
So in that case, disability would be one.
Yep. Yep.
Maybe age.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Ethnicity.
Yep. Dominique brought up that economic status was one, right? It
Rebecca said gender.
Thank you. Could be educational level, right? All right, so with some of the ones that we've talked about, or it could be religious, it could be sexual, could be history of mental illness or substance abuse even, right? So have you ever experienced, whether yourself or you know of somebody else who has experienced discrimination based on any of these characteristics that we've talked about?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to move on here to the next one. My mouse isn't working right. Okay. So let me just see here. Do I have a poll set up for this? I have a poll set up for, is it discrimination here? Let me pull it up. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to read through each of these scenarios. I think there's probably about 5 of them.
Yep.
Answer yes or no, whether you think it's discrimination, then we'll talk about each one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end. I'm going to share the results and we'll go through them. So the first one is a prevention professional instructs program staff to exclude a potential participant from an upcoming program because it would be hard to accommodate his disability in planned activities. Did the prevention professional discriminate against the potential participant? Everyone we got 100% on that one, said yes, and that is correct. You know, denying someone access because of a disability or making reasonable or failing to make reasonable accommodations for someone with a disability are forms of discrimination. And instructing someone to discriminate against another person is also a form of discrimination. The next one is a prevention professional decides only to accept applicants for their youth leadership retreat who are free of piercings and tattoos. Did they discriminate against the youth with piercings and tattoos? We have 88% said yes, 13% said no. The answer is actually yes. And the reason is because it's not based on actual job or program requirements, and it really disadvantages an entire group for consideration, and that's a form of discrimination. The next one, a prevention professional informs a female employee who complained about sexist jokes at the office that she cannot attend an upcoming training because staff members now feel uncomfortable around her. Did the person discriminate? We all agree 100% that it was yes, and that is the correct answer. Because any conduct that might reasonably undermine, offend, humiliate, or intimidate someone, such as telling sexist jokes, is discrimination. And if we penalize someone for complaining about that discrimination, that's also a form of discrimination. Next one. A prevention professional decides to only assign program roles to agency volunteers who have completed a cultural sensitivity training. Did they discriminate against any of the volunteers? Oh, this one was kind of split. We have 38% said yes. We have 63% saying no. The answer is actually no, because it's considered it's not considered discrimination to assign people different roles consistent with their qualifications. So this was based on qualifications, which is okay. Does anyone have any comments to add to that one?
Yeah, because there are people who might be of that culture and haven't done a culture sensitivity training, but maybe don't really need to as much as other people who don't have that background in that culture. So if they're going to say no to those people because they haven't done the training when they might actually have a better understanding of the culture, then I would say that is still discrimination.
Okay, that could be, but if it's part of like what I was thinking of when I looked at this one is, if it's part of like the organization's training that you have to go through this particular training, but maybe there would be exceptions, but they don't really have those spelled out. I could see where that could be, but it's not discrimination because it's a requirement that you have to go through this specific training.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's part of a policy.
Yeah.
Like it's policy or procedure, and I mean, I definitely hear what you're saying, but I think you could go back to like, you know, let's say I have a disability. I think no matter if I do or not, I think something like that you could even add to that training, and I think we can always learn something from it type thing, you know, but I think you just go back to if it's a policy.
I think that it's kind of a trick question because that's kind of not spelled out. Because like, you know, when you say, I thought both ways. I thought, well, if it's required, then it's not. But if it is required, then or vice versa. If it is required, then it's not. But if it's not required, or some other people have had different training, different types of training, then they're discriminating against the different types of training that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look at it that way too. If somebody said, well, everybody's taken mental health first aid from me, and I'm only going to give them opportunity because I thought that they've taken it from me, versus a different type of ethics class or quality, or, a different class under somebody else. So I guess I'd need more information to really answer that question.
Yep.
I had to take 3 different research classes throughout my programs of study, and they were all the same. And you know what? It is what it is. Like, and the cultural training, I don't think is specific to one culture, like a cultural competency or sensitivity training is not like, it's not like, oh, you're Hispanic, so you know everything about all cultures, like someone who's deaf or hard of hearing doesn't know what it's like to be blind, right? So like, and also the opportunity is there for anybody to take it. It's up to them to advance if they want to.
Good, thank you. So yeah, so as we can see just from this scenario alone, it's not always black and white, right? There's some gray areas. And so hopefully the decision-making process that we'll give you can kind of help you to work through that. Well, so maybe if our policy does say that they have to go through this particular training, but yet these scenarios have come up where they've gone through other similar trainings, are we going to allow that? Maybe we need to make some changes to policy. That might be another thing to consider too. So good discussion. Thank you very much for that. And then the last one we have here is a prevention professional asked 2 youth task force members to wait in the other room during a task force meeting while adult members finished discussing one of the agenda items. Did the prevention professional discriminate against the youth members? And we are split down the middle on this one. Does anyone want to comment before I tell you what the answer is?
I feel like I had a hard time answering this just because I didn't feel like there was really enough information, because I mean, it's like, what are the 2 youth task forces? I mean, what are their roles? Like, what's their role on the task force? And, what was the topic? Because if they were, discussing another student or something like that, or if it was a personnel issue or something like that, it probably wouldn't be very appropriate for them to be in there. But if it was something that they've been involved in and then they just ask them to leave, like, I don't really think, then I would think that, yeah, it's kind of discrimination just to kick them out. So I think it just really kind of, there probably needs to be more information on the context around that.
So you would have, if there would have been a maybe option, you would have put that there, right? You would click on maybe. Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Well, if they're task force members and it's a task force meeting, but the only reason why they're asking them to step out is because they're youth, then that's because of their age.
Yep. So you got the answer correct right there with your response. The answer is yes, because they were only asked because of their age to step out. So if there was something on the agenda that wasn't necessarily appropriate for the youth to participate in, then it probably shouldn't have been on the task force agenda to begin with. So I think they need to be considering that. Any other comments or about that? All right, good discussion. This. Oh wait, okay, so it's gonna take me just a minute to get through these. I guess I should have been doing this, but I just decided to go off the poll instead. There we go. All right, so the expectations of the non-discrimination principle are really grounded in the values and best practices of prevention. In many cases, it is required by law, and the federal anti-discrimination laws include the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This act prohibits discrimination based on race, religion, sex, national origin, and other characteristics. Then there's also the American with Disabilities Act of 1990. And this act prohibits discrimination based on disability under certain circumstances. And then the last one that we have listed here is the Equal Pay Act of 1963. And this act prohibits sex-based wage discrimination. It's amazing that it's been that long ago since that happened, and I still feel like there's maybe some sex-based wage discrimination that happens in different organizations. So in your ethics binder that I sent to you, in the very back section, there is a resources and links document. And so there are websites under each of the principles that kind of give you more information. So principle 1, non-discrimination, is on page 1 and 2. And so that is just a helpful resource for you if you are looking further into laws, regulations surrounding discrimination at different levels. And then also, you know, your own agency or institution might have its own policies in place, and I'm guaranteeing it probably does, to prevent discrimination and promote that cultural competence. So it's really our responsibility as prevention professionals to know what those anti-discrimination laws and regulations are at the federal, state, and local, and then even your agency level. Because really failure to comply might damage relationships with program participants and result in potentially loss of certification or program funds, might result in fines, litigation, things like that. So there's one more piece of this, and that is the cultural competence. According to the Prevention Code of Ethics, prevention professionals are expected to avoid discriminatory practices in all forms, whether it's direct or indirect, intentional or unintentional. But yet, just avoiding those discriminating practices isn't enough to fulfill all the expectations of this particular principle. We must also really strive to become culturally competent in everything that we do. So it really is based on, as you can see on this slide, it's based on the ability of an individual or organization to interact effectively with members of diverse populations. As prevention professionals, we really must understand the cultural context of the populations and the communities that we served. And we must have a willingness and skills to work within that context to produce positive change. Is there anyone that has an example of how you have worked to make your prevention practice more culturally competent? Do you have any examples?
I think one of the things is just like educating our agency on like what resources are available. So not only knowing about like what our agency can offer, but also like knowing what services are out there for Native American healthcare, knowing where provides SWEAT or other types of services like that, how to get in contact with people that can help provide some of those services, so that we can kind of be more well-rounded and also kind of help our clients to kind of cross some of those bridges and not have to kind of do it on their own. I know in other agencies that I've worked at before, also providing like transportation to events like that, making clients aware of events that we know of in the community that are culturally competent for them, making time. I used to work in a residential facility, so I know it's a little different than prevention, but making time for cultural activities. So if we know that there's like a powwow in town, making maybe special rules for time to be out of the building. I think one thing that we do too, just in general, is not schedule things at times where it might conflict with people's cultural schedules. So like we don't hold events on Sundays, or maybe Wednesday nights we don't go longer because we know that people might have like church activities. If we know that people need to be out for a cultural situation, then we don't purposefully schedule something, or we kind of make some room for them to miss a group without it working against them. I know we've talked before too about like physical appearance. So if we have, we would never ask somebody to change their physical appearance, but being aware of, like, we had a client once with really long hair, and it was really important for him that we didn't do activities that would maybe disrupt like him taking care of his hair well. If we did activities that like involved helmets and stuff, because that was really important to him. And just kind of being aware and working through that, and not making anybody feel like they're an inconvenience because we're working through their cultural schedules, I guess is the word I would use. Very long-winded, but
Thank you. No, all great examples. You know, I have the example of, you know, and I don't know that all states are like this, but, you know, Wednesday nights are pretty much reserved for, you know, faith-based activities. And so like schools don't typically schedule any sporting events or other events on Wednesday nights. And if they do, at least in my community, they have conversations with the faith-based to say, we would like to do this, is this okay? And if it's not, they don't do it. They respect that because they know that that's a big part of the culture. So thank you for that example. So what I would like to do is, oh, no, I don't want to do that yet. I want you to pull out so in your binder, you have your PowerPoints, and then there should be a sheet, and then there should be like some handouts. So behind the handouts, there's an activity called Enhancing Your Cultural Competence. I would like you to pull that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pair you up. There might be one group of 3. Yeah, there probably will be. And what I'd like you to do is look through this activity. So I want you to review the list of culturally competent prevention practices, which are listed there. And then within your small group, I'm going to have you share something that you've done in your work that kind of illustrates one of these practices. And then identify what's an action step that you would like to take to enhance one of these practices, okay? So I'm only going to give you a short amount of time, probably maybe 5 minutes tops, to be able to do that. All right, welcome back. Hope you guys had some good discussion about the cultural competence and what you have done and what you hope to do. We're not going to process it as a large group just because of time, and we need to move on. So remember our situation that we started out with at the beginning of this section. If I could have Leslie read Leslie's part and Marty read Marty's part. I don't remember who was doing what.
I don't see how we can pass this up. I've heard that this new banquet hall is beautiful. The local kids and families won't mind at all. In fact, I bet they'll love it.
I agree, and our board of directors is thrilled with the idea. I need to give my friend an answer today, or we might lose this opportunity. So what do you think, Kyle?
All right, so what do you think, Kyle? So what I'm gonna do is I'm putting up another poll here. And what I'd like you to do is read the responses and vote on which one you think he should do. We're almost there. Oh, there we are. All right. So interesting. We're kind of split as a group as to what Kyle should do.
We can't see it.
Oh, that's because I haven't shared. Thank you. All right. So nobody thought that Kyle should agree to hold the award ceremony in the donated banquet hall since the agency director and board of directors support this plan. That one does conflict with the non-discrimination principle. By changing the venue, we risk discriminated against the participants with limited transportation. But again, transportation might not be the only thing. It might just be that, you know, the participants are just comfortable in the gym that they've been using. And so moving it might make them uncomfortable and not want them to attend. We talked about that before, right? The second one is refuse the offer of the donated banquet hall since the transportation will be a challenge and many of the participants of the group have already agreed to hold it in the gym. It's consistent with parts of the principle, but it doesn't really address the cultural competence because Kyle would then be retaining all the decision-making power and not really including, you know, well, maybe the people that he's working with would think it's a really good idea, but he doesn't know because he hasn't had a chance to do that. They haven't had a chance to really weigh in, right? The second one, or the third one here, insist on checking with participants as to whether the banquet hall is an acceptable alternative, even if taking the time to do so means risk of losing the facility and disappointing his agency director and the board of directors. So this is actually the one that's the most consistent with the non-discrimination principle because it does give those youth and families that they're working with the opportunity to provide input as to whether this is a good idea or not. If they agree to the new venue, then the agency can see if it's still available, if that option's still on the table, and if not, you know, they still can go back to that original gym that they had as an option, right? Because that would go on as planned. And then the last one, we had about half of us think this was a good one. Only agree to hold the award ceremony in the donated banquet hall if the agency can provide free transportation to the event. So this approach is actually consistent with just part of the principle, but it doesn't address the cultural competence piece of that. You know, the agency is still making the decision for the participants. And again, that transportation might not be the only concern for the participants that are involved. Okay, they might not feel comfortable in that. What's that?
What? Sorry, I'm talking to my son.
Okay. So, so the one that's the most consistent with the principle is option number 3. You know, option number 4 that many of us chose. You know, there was just still some issues with that the agency was making the decisions without really including the participants in the decision-making process. So looking at that cultural competence piece. All right. Well, let me scroll through these here. Oh, too far. All right, so we've really finished exploring the expectations of this non-discrimination principle. You know, we looked at avoiding and preventing discrimination against others, which includes colleagues and service recipients in our work as prevention professionals. We know and comply with federal level and state jurisdictional and organizational anti-discrimination laws and regulations. And we are striving for cultural competence in all prevention practices and continually reflecting on and enhancing our own cultural competence as prevention professionals. So before we turn it over to Michelle to talk about the next principle, what I would like you to do is take out that one sheet, that's kind of our action planning sheet that has the boxes on it. It says ethics and prevention action steps. And what I'd like you to do is take a minute and write down your action steps under the non-discrimination principle, okay? I think what I'm gonna do is, for those of you who are taking this for college credit, I'm just going to have you take a picture of this or scan this and send it to me, and that's all you're going to have to do for the last thing. So,
Jody, while they're doing that, do you want to pull up the next PowerPoint?
I sure will.
Or I can, if you want me to.
It's totally up to you. I'm working on it. Tab 3. You see it?
Yes.
Jody, can you restate exactly what you wanted us to put in the action steps?
Absolutely. So I want you to think about the non-discrimination principle. And I want you to write down what things can you do in your prevention profession to, you know, make sure that you are complying with that non-discrimination principle. What are some of those key concepts that you maybe took away that you're going to work on with this particular principle? Does that help?
So kind of for an example, like studying the people you're serving and the coalition dynamics, and
getting input from them before, you know, when you think about a situation like the one Kyle was in, you know, kind of sticking to that.
just trying to go over everything we've learned so far and just pull out those.
Yep. All right, Michelle, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Okay, so we are now going to look at the second principle, competency. Dodi, you can go to the next slide. So you can see here it says, how do you feel about driving? Well, most of us probably drive and would say that we probably feel pretty comfortable in driving. But I want you to raise your hand when I say these things. So do you feel comfortable driving a car? You can do the manual hand, or you can just kind of. Do you feel comfortable driving a pickup truck? Okay, most of you with that. Do you feel comfortable driving a bus? Not as many hands. Or a tractor trailer truck. Do you feel comfortable driving that? Okay. And okay, so a lot of you said you felt comfortable driving a car. Do you feel comfortable driving a car on a quiet country road? Yes. How about in a suburban neighborhood? So maybe like Sioux Falls. How about in a traffic in a major city like Los Angeles or New York? Would you feel comfortable driving a car in that? Oh, Megan and Emily would. Jody says no. A little bit different than Castlewood. So how about driving a bus in a major city? Would you feel comfortable with that? No, I'm not seeing anybody comfortable with that. And then it says, you know, how many of you would feel comfortable teaching someone how to drive a car? Would you feel comfortable driving or teaching somebody to drive a car? Emily says yes. I don't know if
Megan.
Just did it. Okay.
I don't know about teaching my own kids.
That's what I just did.
Yeah. Yep, it's interesting. A pickup truck, I think. But how about, would you feel comfortable training somebody to drive a bus? Would you feel comfortable teaching somebody how to drive a tractor trailer? So a lot of you saying no on that. And you would maybe, so Dodie would maybe feel comfortable teaching Gracie how to drive on a quiet country road, but how comfortable would you feel training somebody to drive a car in New York or Los Angeles?
I need someone
so
to train me to do that.
Or teach someone to drive a bus in a major city, okay? So with any set of knowledge and skills, including those related to driving, there are various levels of competencies, right? So most of us probably drive a car on a daily basis, especially in South Dakota, but that doesn't necessarily mean, just because we can drive, doesn't mean that we're comfortable driving a bus, and it definitely doesn't mean that we're comfortable teaching people how to drive a bus or drive in a big city. So we may be comfortable and feel skilled at one level, but not another. And it's important that we accurately assess our skills before taking action on performing a set of tasks, like driving a bus in a major city. And I think it goes back to what Charlie said this morning in the beginning, like, you know, you want to make sure you know your stuff before you go in front of a student, right? I feel like I've really had to look at this often over my career in prevention, because when I first started in well, still today, I am trained in many, many different avenues, you know, prevention, violence prevention, mental health, substance use, you know, all these things. And it's like, and we were supposed to be kind of that catch-all be-all, right? People call, they want something on prevention. Yes, we'll do that. And I think we really have to take a step back and go, am I competent in that area? Am I the best person to be providing the information, or should I be referring them to somebody else that might be better equipped to do that? And that can be hard sometimes, but it's the ethical thing to do. And sometimes we can get pushback even from, you know, our agency, because they want us to do things because it's going to bring in revenue, those sort of things, you know, and so that can be a challenge, because no, you know, you should be able to do these things, and or this grant that we're going to write wants you to do this X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do it even though you don't feel confident in that area whatsoever. So I think this is a really important one to look at, and I know I've had to really deal with this over the years with in prevention. If you would go to that think tank code of ethics again and go to the second one that says competency there, you can see this one's a little bit longer than the non-discrimination one. And I'll tell you, we're not going to get through the whole principal competency today. We're just going to get what we can get done, what we can get to through 11:30, and then we're going to stop there, because we told you we'd be done 11:30, and then we'll just finish it on Friday. But is there anybody that would volunteer to read that competency section? And as you're reading it, again, I want everybody to follow along and, you know, highlight or underline some key takeaways from that section.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Megan.
Prevention professionals shall master their prevention specialties body of knowledge and skill competencies. Strive continually to improve personal proficiency and quality of service delivery, and discharge professional responsibility to the best of their ability. Competence includes a synthesis of education and experience, combined with an understanding of the cultures within which prevention application occurs. The maintenance of competence requires continual learning and professional improvement throughout one's career. Prevention professionals should be diligent in discharging responsibilities. Diligence imposes the responsibility to render services carefully and promptly, to be thorough, and to observe applicable standards. Due care requires prevention professionals to plan and supervise adequately, and to evaluate any professional activity for which they are responsible. Prevention professionals should recognize limitations and boundaries of their own competence and not use techniques or offer services outside those boundaries. Prevention professionals are responsible for assessing the adequacy of their own competence for the responsibility to be assumed. Prevention professionals should be supervised by competent senior prevention professionals. When this is not possible, prevention professionals should seek peer supervision or mentoring from other competent prevention professionals. When prevention professionals have knowledge of unethical conduct or practice on the part of another prevention professional, they have an ethical responsibility to report the conduct or practice to funding, regulatory, or other appropriate bodies. Prevention professionals should recognize the effect of impairment on professional performance and should be willing to seek appropriate treatment. Ooh, some tongue
Thank you so much, Megan. That was a lot to dive into there. So any takeaways, anything that you kind of underlined or highlighted that you took away from that section? I'll tell you one thing that sticks out to me, whether you found SAPS to be beneficial or not, substance abuse prevention skills training that you just went through, it's why it's required by the state. You know, we definitely need to have, if you're doing prevention, we should have a basic understanding of prevention, right? We would never tell someone just go in and provide treatment to somebody, be a treatment counselor, but you have no background in treatment. And so this is, I think, a very basic starting point, but it's something, you know, for us to all kind of have that basic common language to start from when it comes to doing prevention. But anything else that stood out to you or comments on any of those? Go ahead, Dodi. So here's the key concepts for this: assessing your qualifications. So am I qualified to do the prevention they're asking me to do? If not, we need to build our own knowledge and skills to be able to do that before we dive into that. We need to be using best prevention practices, which we talked about in SAPS, those evidence-based programs, policies, and procedures. We need to look at our own personal impairment. So there's times in our lives that we might have the knowledge to do that, but if we're personally impaired as far as our own use or our mental health, we may need to take a step back and say we're not the appropriate person to be doing this right now, knowing when we maybe need to take a break, and we'll talk about that. And then addressing the unethical conduct of colleagues, so that omission piece, right? We need to make sure that if we see unethical conduct happening with colleagues, that we're addressing that as well. I think, did we send out the professional code of ethical conduct for prevention specialists, that handout?
Yep, I emailed it. I emailed it with the Zoom info.
Okay, so if you have it printed off, great. If not, you know, so this is what we sign. If you became a certified prevention specialist under the Board of Addiction and Prevention Professionals, we actually sign a separate code of ethics as a prevention specialist. I would say even if you're not a prevention specialist, this would be a good code of ethics to go by if you're doing prevention work, though. And I will tell you, when they looked at redoing the certification, like when we went from certified addiction counselors to licensed addiction counselors, we used to have the level 1, 2, and 3 for addiction counselors. And we went away with that, and they restructured all that. I sat on a committee that worked on that, and we definitely dove into this. You know, is there a need for this code of ethics for prevention specialists, and looking at it and reworking it? And I was really happy to see that we kept it in, because I do think it's very important. But under the responsibilities, for the competency piece, so you can, if you have it in front of you, it says responsibilities, and then it says prevention specialists shall operate at the highest level of honesty and professionalism and will strive to deliver high quality services holding the best interest of the public first. And so for me, that's looking at that best prevention practices. The third bullet point says recognize their personal competence and not operate beyond their skill or training level, and be willing to refer another individual or program when appropriate. So again, we really need to know our own qualifications and know when to say, this is beyond my scope, and I need to refer you on to somebody else. And then that next one, be committed to upgrading their knowledge and skills through ongoing education and training. So building knowledge. So if we do want to be able to provide that training in the future or that class, we are going to go through the appropriate training in order to do that. Go ahead, Dodi. So assessing your qualifications. Have you ever been asked to take on something in your role as a prevention professional that you were unsure of? Have you been asked to do things that you weren't sure that you were qualified to do? I know I have. How did you decide what to do? If you have been in that situation, how did you decide what to do?
Document, document, document.
Can you explain that more, Dominique?
Well, I kind of do a journal and like document certain situations. I like print off certain emails. I just have a paper trail just in case when I'm navigating through and asking questions and working towards trying to be more confident in what I'm doing. But if it is something that's way over my head, then I keep asking questions and keeping that documentation just in case there's something going on where I am in a position to where I'm confronted for why I didn't do something.
Sure. Okay, yeah, thank you. Here's another example. Perhaps you're running a prevention program for all 10th grade students. When the principal asks you to start a new program for students who've been experimenting with alcohol and other drugs. You're unfamiliar with the program and haven't worked with a high-risk population. How do you decide what to do? Well, this is kind of a guide for that. You know, is it aligned with my job description? So if you go back to your job description, doing that group for that indicated population, is that in your job description? Are you familiar with the population and setting? So are you familiar with working with students who are experimenting with alcohol and drugs in a school setting or in a group like that? Are you familiar with the culture of broader community? And then that one talks about including its substance use related norms, data, and resources. And then do I have the relevant training? So have I been trained in understanding and working effectively with the focused population or the setting? So whenever we're confronted with new tasks, projects, or positions, it's important that we assess or reassess our qualifications before taking them on. I just really think this is an important one because over the years, we get asked to do a lot of different things, and I think we need to make sure we're qualified for it. And again, if we're not, we're finding the training to become qualified or getting it referred on to a person that would be better to do that. Go ahead, Dodie. So we talked about building that knowledge and skills. How do you grow as a prevention professional? Well, the first one there, you can click it again, is supervision and mentoring. We don't, I know Charlie, you said that supervision is a really big part of your code of ethics. Yes, in the prevention world, you should have someone who's mentoring you. Or the reality is that sometimes if you guys are working in prevention, you know well that you're maybe the only person in your entire agency that works in prevention and that knows anything or really understands anything about prevention. Like I said, I've been doing this for 16 years and my dad still thinks I'm an addiction counselor, like just totally doesn't get what I do whatsoever. But that's okay. But supervision and mentoring enable prevention professionals to gain valuable perspectives on their work and learn from their experiences. So we did, and I feel like we've done a good job of this over the years, and we could always ramp this up again. We have a packet, we talked about how there was kind of a lack in mentoring. And so we do at the Prevention Resource Centers, I know, we have a packet of kind of things that ideally you have a supervisor within your agency that could mentor you. If not, if you're doing a coalition, like another coalition that's close by that could, you could do it via Zoom, or a PRC, Prevention Resource Center, that could do this mentoring with you. And it was pretty basic, but kind of a checklist of things to go through, different handouts that would be beneficial. So if it's something you guys are interested in more, send us a chat, send something to Dodie or I, because we could definitely get some of that information out to you. And Katie, we'll talk to you about that as well. That might be something at the state level that we want to kind of circle around to and look at that, because I do think that supervision and mentoring is really important. In the Prevention Resource Centers, we're pretty lucky because we typically, if I hire somebody, I can work with them. But it's a challenge because then when you look at that professional development, any of you that are trained in like Dominique, I know you're trained in mental health first aid, youth mental health first aid, those trainings are not cheap to go through. So once you have staff trained, it's tough to restart over and get people trained in all these different things, but it's very, very important. And it's an ever-changing field, and that's why it's important to continue to do that professional development. Listen to webinars, read different articles that you can get, participate in trainings, attend meetings and conferences. Subscribe to those email lists and newsletters and professional journals. Join a local prevention coalition or health association. These are all things, because we can't just say, oh, I'm good in this, right? So when you're a certified prevention specialist, you need 40 hours of continuing education every 2 years that you have to submit to the board. Just like counselors or people in the medical field, things are changing and we need to stay up on that. Any questions or comments on any of that? Everybody is tired. Okay, go to the next slide. This should look very familiar to you because we just went through SAPS, and so hopefully you guys recognize the SPIF flower here, right? So using best prevention practices, we want to make sure it's a data-driven and collaborative strategic planning process. So again, we've assessed our community and we know what the needs are, and that's going to drive our work. And then once we know what that is, we're going to look at what evidence-based programs and strategies are good to match for your community. Not only is it going to address the problem behavior or the risk factors in your community, or in general, but it's a good fit for your community, your population. And then of course, we're going to continue to monitor and improve the prevention process and outcomes, which is really important. And it shouldn't be, we wait 5 years to see if it's making a difference. We are doing project success in the schools and we evaluate 6 months into it and things are not looking good. Okay, maybe we need to reassess that this wasn't the best program for that school and we need to maybe make some mid-course changes, those sort of things. So it's really important that we continue to do, we look at that throughout the year and the years to make sure we're doing the best program and that we can to make a difference within our community. And we talked about this already for SPIF or for SAPS, but how do you know if it's an evidence-based program or policy? You can go to federal registries like the OJJDP, Department of Education, or if you're funded through DSS, they have a list of evidence-based programs you can choose from. And so, there's places to go for that. And just remember, we want to make sure that it's an effective, it's evidence-based, and it's a good fit for our community. All right, recognizing and addressing personal impairment. So as prevention professionals, we must be able to recognize the effects of personal impairment, and that might be stress, depression, or substance use on our job performance, and when necessary, seek appropriate support. So here are some questions that you can help you determine whether you need to pursue some help with personal impairment. Is it affecting the quality of my work? I will share a personal story. I won't go into great detail, but I was experiencing some pretty, quite a bit of anxiety a few years ago. And it was impacting my quality of work. And I did know that, and I did have to take, I remember Dodie and I were supposed to do a mental health first aid training together, and Dodie knows me well enough to know that I would not take this lightly to cancel a training that she was talking about. And we were supposed to do our first mental health first aid training, and I knew I was not in the right mental capacity to do it. It wasn't going to be good for them. It wasn't going to be good for me. And so we unfortunately had to cancel. But I had to take a step back and be like, I need to take care of myself. And that was an ethical thing that you need to do, because that's not good for you or for the people that you are providing services to. So is it affecting my relationship with colleagues? Is it affecting my relationship with program participants? And then the last one is, if I say yes to these, what can I do? So if we find we're unable to fulfill our job requirements in a responsible and effective manner, and our relationships with colleagues and program participants are suffering, then it's not only sensible for you to seek help, you are in fact ethically obligated to do so until the problem is resolved. So I guess I never thought of it as an ethical obligation to do something about it, but I knew it wasn't, I can't continue going on like this and do my job and do it well. So what are some of the different ways that we can seek help as needed with personal impairment? What are some ways that we can seek help as needed with personal impairment for ourselves?
I think just like what you did, asking a colleague and just being honest about where you're at rather than trying to push through. And then, you know, it's really a case by case basement. What am I saying? Not basement. It's on a case by case base. Because like my self-care is not going to be the same as yours.
Right.
So.
Yep. Thanks, Shirley. Yeah, so seeking support from trusted others, including friends and advisors.
Maybe talking with your supervisor about it.
Yes, absolutely, which I did. And at that time, my supervisor and I had a very close relationship. So she knew everything about me and I knew everything about her. And so I had no problem meeting with her. My relationship today is much different with my supervisor, but yeah, you do need to meet with your supervisor to discuss work-related concerns and possible solutions. So to be honest with that, whether it's your supervisor or HR, whoever that might be, right? Talk to a counselor. You know, hopefully a lot of you have EAPs, so the employee assistance programs, so reaching out to them and you can receive some private counseling. I know that's always important to me because when you work in this field, at the time, our EAP program, though, was with Avera Behavioral Health, and I knew most of the counselors there. Now, EAPs a lot of times are via telehealth, and you don't really know the people, which I think is better personally, because working in the field, you know so many of them, you don't really want to reach out. Or just taking the time to heal. So sometimes you need to try to use the FMLA, or take a family vacation, do some self-help strategies, as Charlie talked about. Lighten your workload, whatever it might be. But this is an ethical obligation to look at our own personal impairments and address that so that we are giving the best quality. The best thing we can do is take care of ourselves, right? We need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others, and that's what we need to do as prevention professionals as well. With that, it's 11:31, so I'm going to stop talking and we will pick up where we left off on Friday. Any questions or comments about today, or what to expect moving forward over the next couple of times that we meet? All right, so the next time we're going to meet is Friday, 9:30 Central, 8:30 Mountain. It will be 2 hours again, and we'll pick up with competency where we left off here. Anything else you want to add, Dodi?
Nope, I don't think so.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. See you Friday.
I have an opportunity for anyone that would like to join us. We're having the other side of cannabis presentation from Jody Belcher. I don't know if any of you have heard her speak on cannabis, but we are hosting a Zoom presentation here in Belfouche from noon to 1 o'clock today, and I can send a link to anybody that would like it. I know that Belinda wanted it, and I have misplaced her email, so I don't know if anybody else wanted.
Holly, if you just want to send it to me, I'll send it out to the entire group.
I wish
That would be
we
wonderful.
have our staff meeting today.
She's really good.
What's that?
What'd you say,
She
Megan?
is
Would you be able to
excellent. I
watch it
listened.
during your staff meeting?
I wish I could. Probably get
You
a
could all